Superfund sites are areas deemed to be too toxic to inhabit due to a number of different reasons, but most commonly from the past operations that were designed to gather the resources from the land or water in that area. Many of you have never heard of a Superfund site. Maybe that's because it's a scary topic that most people overlook, or maybe it's just kept a little more quiet than you would expect. Studying history and exploring abandoned locations forced me to come across one of these locations. When I looked further into it, I had no idea how many toxic sites there actually are. Pennsylvania is in third place next to New Jersey and California to having the most Superfund sites in the country. Now I'm determined to cover as many of these sites as possible and bring awareness to what could be in your backyard. This is Superfund Siteseeing. According to the EPA, the 32-acre Center County Capone site located in State College, Pennsylvania, was a chemical manufacturing facility. The facility produced the pesticide Capone in 1958, 1959, and 1963, and the pesticide Mirex in 1973 and 1974. Processed wastes originally were disposed of on-site in a spray irrigation field and lagoons and stored in drums on site. After leaks were discovered, the material in the lagoons was solidified and disposed of in 2 earthen lagoons and capped. Approximately 2,100 people lived within 1 mile radius of the site. The closest residence is less than a quarter mile from the site. In 1982, a section of the adjacent Spring Creek was designated as a catch and release zone for fishing as a result of high levels of pesticides in the fish. The site was added to the Superfund's program National Priorities List in 1983. In 2001, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania determined that the catch and release zone was no longer required. All chemical manufacturing operations at the facility ceased in March of 2004. So what has been done to clean up the site? In June 1960, the Pennsylvania Department of Health, later renamed the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Resources, or PADER, conducted a site inspection in response to a chemical odor near Thornton Spring. The Department of Health identified the lagoons as the source of the odor and ordered Nice to construct a concrete lagoon and macadamize an earthen lagoon with asphalt. Nice complied. In 1969, Pater determined that the water from the spray field was affecting Thornton Spring. Pater recommended the use of the spray field be discontinued and that the facility prevent further discharges to Thornton Spring. Nice complied with their recommendations. In response to a Pater order in May of 1972, Nice treated the wastewater and sludge in the concrete in earthen lagoons using a process called chemfix to stabilize and solidify the material. Nice also disposed of the contents of the asphalt impoundment and backfilled the asphalt in earthen impoundments. In November 1977, Pater issued an administrative order to investigate environmental impacts at the site and to abate discharges of industrial waste. After acquiring the property, Rutgers Organics Corporation, ROC, constructed an on-site groundwater treatment facility in October of 1982 and began operating the facility in November 1982. EPA proposed the site for inclusion on the National Priorities List on December 1, 1982, and placed it on the NPL on September 8 of 1983. May 1986, EPA took over as lead agency for the site. ROC and EPA entered into an administrative order on consent on November 7, 1988, requiring ROC to conduct a long-term remedial investigation and feasibility study at the site. April 1995 operable unit record of decision was finalized in April 1997. A consent decree was issued. All OU1 activities were constructed by March 2000, and a ROD amendment was issued in 2001. In early 2003, the enhanced soil vapor extraction system became operational. In November 2004, an 8-acre area of the site referred to as the administration parcel was partially deleted from the NPL. The administration parcel included the current ROC administration building, associated parking lot, and open areas. The administration parcel was never used for manufacturing operations and is located up gradient from the contaminated portion of the site. EPA entered into an administrative settlement and order of consent with a potentially responsible party for a removal response action at the site in May of 2007. The AOC addresses contaminated sediments from the lower portion of the freshwater drainage ditch and Thornton Spring drainage channels. Work for this removal action was completed in July of 2008. In July 2009, EPA issued a second ROD for the site addressing OU2. OU2 areas that were investigated include the soils of the 15-acre former spray field area and riparian areas of Spring Creek. The sediments from the lower freshwater drainage ditch, Thornton Spring outlet and drainage channel, and dispository areas in the Spring Creek downstream of the Benner Fish Hatchery. The selected remedy in the OU2 ROD included the following major components: a soil cover for surface soils within the remediation parcel portion of the former spray field area, and a combination of a soil cover, pavement building cover, or excavation/disposal and replacement with clean soil for surface soils within the redevelopment parcel portion of the former spray field area. Security fencing between the redevelopment and the remediation parcels. Institutional controls to protect the remedy. A consent decree, or CD, for OU2 remedial design/remedial action activities was entered with a court in March of 2011. Under the settlement, ROC agreed to 1. Implement the ROD for OU2, 2. Reimburse 100% of the United States past costs, 3. Pay all future response costs, 4. Commence the work pursuant to an early action settlement agreement, and 5. Reimburse the Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection's response costs. The design of the OU2 selected remedy was approved by the EPA in June of 2011. Construction of the remedy was completed by ROC in September of 2011. So what is the current site status? EPA is overseeing the cleanup of the Center County Capone site, being carried out and paid for by Rutgers Organic Corporation. All physical construction is complete at the site, and it is in long-term operation and maintenance, which includes environmental monitoring. EPA has conducted several 5-year reviews of the site's remedy. These reviews ensure that the remedies put in place protect public health and the environment, and function as intended by the site decision documents. The most recent 2014 5-year review concluded that the remedy continues to be protective of human health and the environment for operable units. OU2 and 3 operable unit OU1 is protective of human health and the environment in the short term. The groundwater remedy for OU1 is generally functioning as intended, but there are areas where elevated concentrations remain. Additional data is being collected to better refine the contaminant distribution and remedy effectiveness. Activity and use limitations of the site. At this site, activity and use limitations that EPA calls institutional controls are in place. Institutional controls play an important role in site remedies because they reduce exposure to contamination by limiting land or resource use. They also guide human behavior. For instance, zoning restrictions prevent land uses, such as residential uses, that are not consistent with the level of cleanup. Institutional controls are in place to prevent use of groundwater, erosion control, and limit uses of some parcels for future development. So what is Capone? Capone, also known as chloridazone, is an organochlorine compound and a colorless solid. This compound is an obsolete insecticide related to Mirex and DDT. Its use was so disastrous that it is now prohibited in the Western world, but only after many thousands of tons have been produced. Capone is a known persistent organic pollutant that was banned globally by the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants in 2019. In the U.S., Capone was produced by Allied Signal Company and Life Sciences Product Company in Hopewell, Virginia. The improper handling and dumping of the substance into the nearby James River in the 1960s and 70s drew national attention to its toxic effects on humans and wildlife. The product is similar to DDT and is a degradation product of Mirex. Capone was not federally regulated until after the Hopewell disaster, in which 29 factory workers were hospitalized with various ailments, including neurological. Capone is cited amongst a handful of other noxious substances as a driver for General Ford's half-hearted approval in 1976 of the Toxic Substances Control Act, which remains one of the most controversial regulatory bills ever passed. The history of Capone incidents are reviewed in Who's Poisoning America? Corporate Polluters and Their Victims in the Chemical Age of 1982. In 2009, Capone was included in the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, which bans its production and use. So now that we know the history of the site and the chemical that it produced, let's go take a look at it in person. So here we are at the main entrance, and as you can see, there's not much to look at, and that's going to be the case with most of these places. They're usually torn down, but we might get lucky and have some abandoned buildings at some of them. But here's another case of just a wide open space that is too toxic to inhabit. Now along this road, as you can see, we're in a neighborhood, and there are countless houses that are right outside of the security fence of this site, and it doesn't look like they were built recently. So I mean, they've been here when this was an active site, so I can't imagine these people felt too comfortable knowing what was going on in there, if they did know. So there was no way to access the lagoon. It was pretty much fenced in. You can't really tell by the map, but it was. So at least you can see it from the sky, and I can't imagine walking up on it. It would be much more glorious. So future plans for the site. I don't have a success story for this one because I honestly don't know what plan they have for it. Maybe one of you know. I'm not really that familiar with the area like I was the last Superfund site, so I have no idea what this is going to become anything, or if it ever will, because it is pretty toxic, and I can't imagine anyone developing anything on this site for a very, very long time. But you never know. I mean, what do I know? So if you know of anything that's going to happen here, please comment below and let us all know. But stay tuned for the next toxic Superfund site, and thank you for watching Superfund Siteseeing.
Check it out, man. I mean, this merch is like really sick. Check me out, bro.